So, where should we start, Graham? What have you picked up from today?
Skills crisis. We always talk about a skills crisis. I said earlier on, I've been 22 years, I think, on BESA and HVCA committees, and we've always talked about a skills crisis. But we've always kind of focused on technical skills, but the roles in industry are so much more diverse than that. And obviously we need to increase the diversity in industry because I think the figure I heard earlier was 16% of engineers are women. That's far too low a figure, obviously. The RACHP sector is even worse, than 9%. So there's huge challenges in it. So we have a skills crisis, and yet we're seemingly repelling a huge proportion of the population. And that's just looking at gender. I'm not even talking about further diversity.
Yes, certainly. And also one of the things that came up in the building safety session was about we focus on technical skills. That's what we do. If we say we've got a skill shortage, we only say, well, we haven't got people who can fit pipework or fit ventilation. We don't actually talk about the skills that are going to be needed to deliver a future building, which are about the ability to lead and cooperate, and about attitude. We need a new attitude, don't we, if we're going to deliver these buildings and not replicate what happened at Grenfell. Otherwise, we just repeat, rinse, repeat. And what's attractive about an industry that's not collaborative and cooperative and doesn't deliver? Not very attractive for anybody. So that was one of the key areas that I think I took out. The lack of diversity. I think you gave me some figures earlier from the STEM Amazing thing.
Yeah, well, that was looking at that 16% and the 9% thing. But then if you look at from the energy point of view, we know that the built environment is responsible for something like 40% of all of the energy consumption. So clearly, we know that young children are really engaged with the whole environmental discussion, all of the issues they face. So if we're going to actually improve the way our buildings perform, we really need to make sure we actually encourage the brightest minds to come into our sector.
Claire, have you got the microphone? Can we, Alexander, were you in that? Can you just sort of help us to expand upon that a little bit for those because not everybody could get through every session.
Yeah, absolutely. So I completely agree. Young people, and Inst Amazing, we predominantly work with primary school children. So we've got 7-year-olds telling us when we go and talk to them about what do they care about. They're the ones telling us, I care about climate change. I care about flooding in countries. I care about plastics in the ocean. I care about having a future that, they can be a part of and live a healthy life and for the planet to be healthy. So if we can show them that it's STEM skills and all the skills, complementary skills around that are going to be the sectors that are going to solve these problems, that's inspiring to them to then continue pursuing those subjects and think about themselves in those careers in future. I think it's, one of the biggest problems we have is definitely you can't be what you can't see, not enough diverse people getting out and talking to young people about what they do, particularly in STEM, but also the fact that a lot of, especially in building services, a lot of what is done in those industries is hidden and we take it for granted. So getting out there and telling young people, actually, you wouldn't have this school building, you wouldn't have, like Lisa Jane mentioned, you wouldn't have the internet, all these things that you love and you rely on, you wouldn't have them if it wasn't for people working in those industries. So making it tangible for young people is also very inspiring, as well as linking it to global challenges.
Right, Adrian's got a point back there. If you want to raise a point, just raise your hand. I'm going to come to Helen afterwards.
I'll link in with that.
Coming to you next. Yeah.
But just to follow on from the future engineer that I've just come out of, I think that's where we need to spend a little bit of time. What shape this future engineer looks like. We had a little glimpse, but I think there's a lot more time. We need to put a lot more time and effort into the development of what that future engineer does and can do, and we want him to do. But I was in a secondary school yesterday afternoon with teachers and a deputy head, and I was paired up with a teacher from art and the careers officer. And I thought, well, the next half an hour is going to be a bit of a waste of my time. There was a maths teacher there, a physics teacher, and they don't kind of get it always. The teaching profession doesn't always know we need to teach engineers to become engineers. Art has its part. I suppose it could have been an architect, maybe they were thinking they'd become, but they wouldn't necessarily become an engineer through art. So that's just some thoughts. Sorry.
Have we got any architects in the room? It's all art, darling. Right. Helen, say that safe in the knowledge that there isn't one here.
Thanks, Claire.
And just to warn you, I sprang that on Helen, and I may spring that on other people in the fourth. So keep drinking the beer because it'll make it easier. Helen, what's your take on that?
So obviously skills is at the heart of everything I do, Director of Training and Skills for BESA. So can I do my standard statistics, guys? This year there are 728,000 kids that are leaving sixth form, okay? Now out of those 728,000 kids, 310,000 are going to end up in university. Now it doesn't mean that we don't want some of those. We're going to get some of those, absolutely, of course. But actually, when you start to look at the job problem we've got out there, as in there's 100,000 HGV driver vacancies, there's 100,000 NHS vacancies right now, and we don't have any people to fulfill those. We are all fishing in the same pool. Now, the other statistics you can add in, and I mentioned this in the Women in Engineering piece, they don't just want climate change, they absolutely do. That's completely right. They want to make a difference, this next generation. That's really fundamental to everything they do. But they will not work for a business that is not diverse. 93% of them want to work for a business that looks like it's diverse. And by diverse, that's not just makeup of gender, that's makeup of everything you can possibly imagine. So we need to change the way we look, and we need to do something about that quite rapidly. And that's a cultural change, and the collaboration is part of that cultural change as well.
Right, thank you, Helen. So the next thing I came on to now is we looked at future engineer, future skills, future buildings. And I chaired the first session, and Francis Brown from Hawley made some really interesting points about there being constantly challenged about new build. Why are you using a new building? Why don't you refurbish? And that increasingly will be the mechanism that councils and government use to challenge embodied carbon and to reduce that. Is that things that people are beginning to see? Has anybody got any views on that they picked up from that or any other session today? Silence. then it's Graham.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we talk a lot about embedded carbon, and there's an embedded carbon calculator now that SIBSE yeah, it's a hugely important issue, but actually the bigger picture is that if we can refurbish better, then we automatically reduce that carbon content, carbon consumption. That's so much more important, and yet there's so much. We live in a throwaway society. Everything's kind of, it's cheaper to replace than it is to refurbish nowadays. And I think it's I say quite a lot, there's this mentality change, culture change needed very much.
Cool. So where are we going to go next? You can all chip in if you wish about things. We did the Building Safety Act, very high-powered panel for that. Interesting piece that I took from that is that there is political consensus around the Building Safety Act, and actually if we had a new government, rather than slow the process down, they'd probably speed it up and make it a little bit tougher. So we've got to get our heads round what the Building Safety Act means for us. And from what Howell Davis was saying, it's every building, not just high-risk, high-rise building. Every building is impacted by the new Act. And the advice for contractors was that make sure you can evidence competence and compliance in everything you do, because someone's going to come knocking on your door, possibly 30 years later, to say, what did you do then? And if you haven't got a body of evidence to show what you did do, you're always defending the, well, when did you stop beating your wife stuff, aren't you? From there.
Yeah, I mean, Jill Kernick picked up on that during that session as she was talking about competence. But she was saying one of the issues is we tend to stick to technical competence. Most of our focus, because we're a technical industry, is on the technical competencies. And it's because that's what we understand best, she said. But We also need to be competent in areas like analysing why we fail, risk management. That's not necessarily the technical side, the engineers that actually do that. So important, again, that we embrace out with the technical side from the skills people, to bring in people that just look at our industry with different eyes. It's that looking at things with different eyes, see opportunities and ways to deliver something or ways to handle a particular issue that we as engineers maybe wouldn't see.
I guess most of you, certainly I did, passed Grenfell on the way here today. It's still an eerie sight as you pass it. But to many, many people in our industry, it may as well have happened in another country. The awareness, the lack of awareness about this. They very strongly, Jill spoke about this and very strongly said, this is a moral and ethical thing as well, getting this right. We need to do something about it. I've said this, I think, at every conference since I've been chief executive, but the Grenfell podcast, listen to it. Seriously, if you're in the industry, you should be on the curriculum. But listen to one of the last sessions where Richard Merritt, I think his name was Richard Merritt, the senior barrister, gives his summing up. And it's not only moving, but it's something that if that doesn't stir you to action, nothing ever will. Because it sums up everything that was wrong. It wasn't me, it was somebody else. The most used word, I think, in the whole of the Grenfell inquiry was, I assumed that somebody else was doing it. And guess what? Nobody did it. They had a great Arab slide. I think it was the great buck passing thing, and just arrows of everybody passing the buck to somebody else. Interestingly...
It was Richard Millett.
Richard Millett. Interestingly as well, she thought that it isn't that most companies don't want to do something about it, they just don't know what to do about how to respond to the Building Safety Act. And Howell Davis was saying that there's masses of regulation coming down the track that will start to flesh out how the Building Safety Act will impact us. But it's one of those things where you don't know all the detail yet, but if you wait till you know all the detail, you'll be too late. And there was very much a call to action. So the stuff we've done around the competence assessment standard, and Duncan, are you in there? In the room? Good. You ran a session this afternoon on that. How did that go? The stuff we've done for there, we're ahead of the market. And those guys who've been through that process, you're doing stuff that's actually not required by the industry yet, but will be. And the fact you can get through that and evidence is a big, big bonus of being a BESA member. Duncan, how was that session?
Yeah, we had a good session, and we talked just about that actually. We mentioned as well how it was mentioned earlier on in the day that Dame Judith Hackett had said that the industry isn't doing enough, and we picked up on that from how we've made the competent assessment standard more robust, and how that is ahead of its time. And whilst there may be other schemes, other systems, other processes that are still to come in, that because we've put that in place, that it really will help with that moving forward. Yeah.
Great.
The reason, I thought Jill Kernick's opening presentation at that session was very moving, because we're 5 years on and everyone is starting to see, I think, what we've been saying for 3 years, that this is going to affect everyone. The Building Safety Act, the implications of it, the ramifications are huge on our entire sector. And I think now that some people, that penny is starting to drop with people, there's a lot of the kind of feel, why are we going through all this pain? Why are we actually doing this? And that was why we asked Jill to give that presentation at the start, because she was at Grenfell Tower. She talks about the real life aspect of it, and that's why it was so moving. And I think it was really to kind of bring it back, bring the human side of Grenfell Tower back again. I doubt if anyone here for that session wasn't moved by.
So, should we talk about air quality? Our keynote speaker talked about ventilation. Kath, still here. Thank you. Great discussion about the importance of ventilation, what we're doing about it. And for those of you who missed it, I asked the question at the end, how long before we go into any building and we can tell how good the air quality is? And at that point, we're all probably going to wonder what it's like in here now after a period of time. I wonder when they clean their filters. Yeah, that's another good one. So, Kath, have you had many questions since then that you can... any new revelations from people, questions that you weren't expecting?
I don't think I have actually, particularly. I mean, I guess actually to touch on a point that you both made earlier around competency and those softer skills that we need to do with competency, and I think that goes across into the air quality, ventilation, the health of our buildings too, and it comes down to people. So the whole point of a building is it's there for people, and therefore we need to understand people as part of how we make our buildings better, and we're never going to be able to improve those buildings properly unless we understand what motivates people and what their capabilities are to be able to manage those buildings well, and to be able to use the systems that we put into them correctly. So I think solving this there's a big technical challenge, but I think a lot of the technical's there. It's about how we deliver that properly.
You say we should be employing psychologists.
Yeah, but it's interdisciplinary. It's about understanding human factors, human behaviour, alongside the engineering, which is really important. And I think it actually comes back to a comment that was made earlier about where does things like art fit in? Actually, I think you can use creative art to understand, how do people experience spaces? What do they think of those spaces? And what does that mean for us as engineers as to how we can design and operate them better?
Because you talked in your session about it's the occupancy, isn't it, of buildings, and it's something that it has such a huge impact on the actual delivery of the air quality in a building. And schools, you talked about, you had a slide up about schools in the session as well, with the TAPAS network, monitoring in schools. The divergence through the day in a classroom is enormous.
I mean, absolutely, if there's nobody in a building, you can make it really energy efficient and everything works perfectly, But it doesn't work that way, and we really have to remember that the point of everything is to create those environments that are right for the people who live, work, socialise, learn, etc. in those buildings.
Graham and I were just chatting before we came in, and one of the things, the question I would have asked you, or meant to ask you, was that this winter we're hearing about people having to make a choice between eating and heating. And you can imagine that many people are going to spend their time filling in the holes in their house as far as possible. No heating, sitting in the cold. Are we storing up a huge health crisis related to that in future years?
Yes, I think we are. I think we're storing we're going to create an immediate health crisis because everybody who switches their heating off and seals their building up creates colder, damper environments. They are going to be instantly more exposed to anything in that environment in the first place. But yes, because you could say, well, actually, if we only do it for 1 year, does that matter? But the problem is, once you've done it once, you'll keep doing it. And in some places, we should be, I wouldn't say sealing buildings up, but we should be dealing with uncontrolled ventilation and air tightness. But we've got to then put the controlled ventilation in place in there and allow people to realise why that matters.
Right, thank you. So we're very lucky today to have Rosamond with us. You should have been expecting this, Rosamond. So Rosamond Adukisi-Deborah, who is a great clean air campaigner. Very nice of you to come and join us again today, Rosamond. What were your reflections upon what you heard today?
Well, you actually won't be surprised that I've spent most of my time actually trying to get as much knowledge of from Kathy as possible. And I think what you said really touched me about the Grenfell. And I just want people here to remember, it really ultimately is about people So when you go out into these buildings, just imagine if you were staying there. Yes, I have been part of a very public inquest that no one wanted to take accountability, as you said, passing the buck around. But that's what I would want people to take from here, that we spend over 90% of our time in buildings, whether residential or public buildings. And ultimately, like Kathy said, it is about health, and people's health matter, people matter. And it's about preventing death. And when I say that, people just feel a bit awkward, but ultimately, that's what it's about. There are people here from Asthma UK, and I was listening to the lady tell me there are people that can't go outside, who are stuck in their homes. So it definitely matters, and what you do matters, and it will impact people's lives. We don't want to wait till it's too late. And I find Kathy's talk very inspiring, and we are going to have a new government in, and it will be about not just legislation, but enforcing that legislation as well. And that's my take up. Yeah, it would take me a good few days for it to sink in, to see what we can do different. But just try and remember that's a place that people are going to spend majority of their time at.
Mm-hmm. And the thing is, we tend to focus on ventilation, commercial buildings, but we don't look at the home. Historically, we really haven't looked at the environment. But actually, what the pandemic's done, of course, is made an awful lot of people spend even more time in the home. So if they have got poor ventilation domestically, you're just exacerbating that. Huge issue.
Just to add to that as well, I chaired a couple of sessions today, the healthy building and too much talk, not enough action. And the main point that come back is what a few of us have said now. It's about people in buildings, real human beings in the spaces that we look after and maintain, the building engineering services sector, the physicians of buildings. And I asked the panel, what makes you happy in a building? And we had biophilic design, good views. And the last one was people, being around people. And if we cast our mind back to COVID, when you couldn't hug your friends, your relatives, your colleagues, I think there's a real disconnect between us as engineers and knowing that there are actually people living in the building beneath us when we're working or in and around us. So it's that human experience that we need to take on board as engineers as well.
Great, thank you. So we haven't got too long now, Graham, I don't think. Who was in the fire damper session? Ah, good, okay. I thought you were on your way to A&E from what I heard. We weren't there. Who says engineers don't get passionate about things? Pete, how was the fire damper session? I only heard it was lively.
It was passionate, and it's good to see that everyone is passionate about it, because it is a problem, certainly. So yeah, it's good to have a lively session. It went very, very quickly, and really all I can ask everybody that's attending here today is to please look at their projects that they're working on, to make sure that they don't keep following the same path of installing fire dampers incorrectly. So if you can take one thing away from here today, please make sure you do it right. I know we're working on DW 145, a lot of work to do on that. It's a tricky subject, but we'll get there, and everybody's very passionate and got different ideas, certainly. But a very lively session.
Anybody else on the fire damper session? No? No blows? Good. Okay, should we wrap it up with the industry comes together? It's not often that actually bodies and companies can come together to develop joint standards, but we've managed to do that, aligning the data standards, and SFG 20 have been involved in that with CIBSE, RICS and NBS. I'm looking to somebody from the SFG team who can kind of field what was that about. Kirsty.
Yeah, so this was about the fact that there's lots of different bodies that have brilliant standards that do very specific things at different points in the life cycle, and the need to actually build a thread and a line of sight between them all, so that design decisions that are taken, actually we have an understanding of how that's going to affect the operational phase of the building, because ultimately that's where 80% of the costs are. So it's a really exciting kind of step forward that we're now talking together as an industry. We've come together, a number of different representatives, and we're going to work hard to really align the standards and help industry understand which standard you use at which point and how they work between them, so that we don't have those big gaps of data falling at project handover and the data is just lost. So an exciting step forward.
Great, thank you. So I got one final thing to do, but has anybody got any topic that they think we should discuss, or we need to form a group, or need a new standard for, or anything else that came out of today? Bar must be open.
We've obviously done our job properly.
Okay, so a final thing then. Mercer Marsh Benefits today ran a competition for a pair of AirPods. Graham Wills from Mercer Marsh is here, and the winner was Arul Chandradajit from Ace Building Services. And is Arul here? He's gone. Is anybody from Ace here? No? Okay, you can give it to me then, and I'll make sure he goes there. Okay, what a great day. Actually, exceeded my expectations. There was a buzz in the room as soon as I came in this morning. We had a change of Prime Minister caused by this event, which is fantastic. We've had some fantastic speakers, so thank you to all of them. Thank you again to all our sponsors. We really, really couldn't do this without you. And thank you to all our speakers, all the technical experts that came in. But most of all, thank you for investing in yourselves, taking the time to come and find out a bit more of what you didn't know you didn't know. And I hope there's something when you go back to your desk, you're going to go, I need to do that straight away. For those of you staying for the awards, I look forward to having a beer with you later. And thank you and goodbye. Oh, one final thing. Charlie, are you here? How does that work? Charlie Pierpoint organised this, but with the marketing team. So could actually all the BESA staff who were involved in the conference please stand up and thank you for the huge amount of effort you put into organising this today. So thank you. And 12th of November 2023, we'll be here. So make sure you put it in your diary now, 12th of November 23, and the 2nd of February, don't forget, change of Prime Minister. Thank you.